Thank you, Chairman Langford, and thank you, all of you, for your service and for agreeing to come here during the holiday season. We really appreciate it. This has been an incredibly active subcommittee, probably the most active subcommittee in all of the Senate, because this is a committee where we come to talk about how we can do things better. And if anyone thinks you can't do things better, they're wrong. Nobody's perfect. We have to constantly be striving. You know, the federal government spends hundreds of millions of dollars annually to have federal programs audited and investigated by the Government Accountability Office, GAO, and the Offices of Inspector General, the IGs. The GAO and IG spend their days providing incredibly valuable recommendations on how the federal government can be more effective and efficient with those sacred taxpayer dollars. This type of oversight is critical and valuable. The American people can be sure that their taxpayer dollars are being used wisely when agencies like GAO and IG recommendations are taken seriously, and that we use those recommendations to make government more efficient and government better. Our hearing today is about learning more about how we can improve agency follow-up and make sure that everyone is doing their part in assessing and improving recommendations and recommendation follow-up. The work that GAO and Inspector Generals perform in providing recommendations to agencies is important, and the recommendations should not go unimplemented or unnecessarily delayed. I want to just point out one of the topics I want to cover today. And as you can see from the audit process over to the side, on the chart on the left, a great deal of planning and many hours of work go into the auditing process by GAO and IGs. We want to make sure that that hard work doesn't go unnoticed, unappreciated, and certainly unimplemented. But I want to also draw your attention to the lower left-hand side. You'll see GAOs working on work on monitoring and implementation of recommendations. Over the years, GAO has taken a number of steps to increase oversight of whether those recommendations have been implemented. The GAO maintains an online database of open recommendations that still need to be addressed by agencies. And according to GAO's website, the goal of the recommendation database is to help congressional and agency leaders prepare for appropriation and oversight activities, as well as improve government operations. Because of this database of open recommendations, we know that there are almost 4,600 open recommendations with federal agencies. This is a huge number, and it's not insignificant. And I hope we can discuss today how we can lower that number and move forward, give you the tools to continue to do your excellent work. But I also want you to take a look at the other side. When we look at the recommendations that Inspector Generals provide, they operate differently than GAO. It's a little more challenging for us as decision makers here to know how federal agencies are responding to Inspector General recommendations. The information is not as transparent as what it is at GAO. And while the IGs are required by law to provide a semi-annual report to Congress tracking audit recommendations and implementation, each IG has their own system for tracking those recommendations. IGs do not maintain a central database in which all outstanding recommendations government-wide are inputted, stored, and accessible to members of Congress and the public. While we know there are IGs doing terrific work, great work, we need to know about that follow-up, and we need to see if we have inconsistencies across agencies. You know, every agency operates differently, but a lot of these recommendations, I would assume, are fairly consistent across the board. So it's not just Congress that would win with having a more open process regarding IG recommendations, but other IGs, I think, taking a look at the work that's being done. So today's hearing is about learning the recommendation follow-up practices that work for agencies and figuring out how we can do more, how we can reduce those number of recommendations that are not followed through on. So we are not here, as you know, in this committee to place blame. This is the Good Government Committee, and everybody should be for good government. There's no controversy about this. I think just as you are very nonpartisan, not bipartisan, but nonpartisan, this committee's been very nonpartisan in how we evaluate and look at some of these challenges of an efficient government. And so I want to thank Chairman Langford for his excellent leadership And we look forward to hearing this testimony and having an ongoing dialogue this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing. I want to get back to kind of collaboration, and I think, Jean, you know I've been asking you kind of repeatedly whether it would be a good idea to prioritize recommendations. Let's say there's limited resources within the agency, kind of big bang for the buck. I failed to write this down, but I think you said for every dollar invested in GAO, you return over $130 in savings, right? Was it 135, Jean?
34, you're only a buck
34,
off.
34, okay, 134. That's what I was going to say. But that's a pretty good return on investment. But when people don't implement the recommendations, we're not only frustrating the purpose of government, but we're frustrating this opportunity for financial savings. So, you know, when you look at the creation of a possible database that would serve kind of as a crosswalk across the top 25 open GAO recommendations and any related IG recommendations for agencies to address specific findings. Can we look at a way of prioritizing or collaborating or actually, you know, as we whittle down this number, you know, if they take the low-hanging fruit, I don't want them always to take the low-hanging fruit, is my point. Because doing the tough thing has the effect of having long-term systemic reforms that will reap rewards and financial opportunities going forward. So
I agree with you, and as a step in that direction,
that's always a good way to start an answer to the
that's right.
question. I agree with
Well,
you.
I've learned something in over 100 hearings. As a step in that direction, though, I've sent these letters to all major departments and agencies with the total, but also prioritizing them on very limited number of areas where I think there are dollar savings and big improvements that could occur. We've shared those letters with the Congress, with the various committees, the appropriation and authorizing committees for the agencies. So we could start there with a list of those priority recommendations that we've made and make a major push on that where Congress could hold hearings, write follow-up letters, et cetera. And then we can figure out a way to better institutionalize that in the database.
Yeah, I'm very excited about what you're doing, and I hope you share with our staff all of those letters. So even, you know, once again, it's the diffusion of all this authority. You know, this is the committee where it all can come together. Michael, thank you so much, and I'm going to go back to my chart. You know, and obviously GAO has that consolidation. You're present, kind of the internal auditor, the internal watchdog in every agency, so we don't have that overarching view of what the IG recommendations are. There may be, you know, some patterns that we can see that we need to take corrective action on. Mm-hmm. What do you think about doing a database, doing something like GAO does that can give us a better kind of view from a mile high?
I think it's a great idea. I think the issue has been for us in the IG community. Congress created the Council of IGs in 2008 to try and play some of these functions. We haven't been funded with an appropriation in any year since our creation. The last 4 years we've asked to be included in the President's budget. We haven't been. We've been funded through a variety of mechanisms, and we're talking about requests of about $4 million that we've asked for. Our budget this year is about $6.5 million. It takes a fair amount of staff to do that kind of work and IT infrastructure as well. We don't think we even have the IT capacity to do that at this point without an actual appropriated, direct appropriation.
It's just so frustrating because this is so penny wise and pound foolish. I mean, to not have agencies like yours fully funded, in fact, not even challenge you to amp up your work, you know, to realize more savings. And so we want to participate and play a pretty active role in encouraging and being your advocate here to get that level of funding, because I think that it would be very enlightening to see those recommendations across agencies and see what we're seeing over and over again as recurring patterns of inefficiency.
And just to pick up the investment point, every dollar invested in IGs returns about $18 in much the same way. So, and that doesn't count, for example, in my agency, all the non-dollar related work we do, like on a Fast and Furious, like on national security
Yeah,
letters. And that kind of
and I think Jean made such an excellent point that not only do we see dollar returns, but we see returns in better services. You know, the point that Joni made about, veterans. It's not just about dollars, this is livelihood. And Colonel Crumpacker, when I started on this committee, we had, we were tearing our hair out because there was an attitude, we believed, at GAO, about GAO at Homeland Security that was not very conducive to resolving a lot of the controversy. And with your presentation today, we're seeing a pretty positive attitude, see the numbers go down. I think that is really a step in the right direction, so I want to applaud the effort of Homeland Security in stepping up and actually being responsive. I think that's a great step forward and real progress. With that, I'll yield the floor. It just kind of boggles my mind that from somebody who used to run a state agency, and when the state auditor gave me a recommendation, man, we turned heaven and earth to get it done. I mean, because we knew there was going to be political accountability, and oversight committees in the state legislature. We fought. I mean, we didn't always agree with what the state auditor told us, but we certainly came to terms and said, let's get this done. Let's get the review done. And so I think part of this is trying to change the dynamic of what seems to be maybe a little bit too cavalier of an attitude that, well, it's just those guys, it might be a bad hearing on the Hill, but everybody will forget about it and we'll just go about our life the way we've always gone about our life. And how do we change that attitude? And I think, Colonel, I want to talk to you because I think we have, and I think Jean would agree, have seen an attitude change at DHS, at the Department of Homeland Security. What kinds of things internally did you do to really make the supervisors and everybody there aware that these are problems, we don't want to go to the Hill anymore and say we're on high risk and doing nothing about it. Let's change attitude, let's work collaboratively and cooperatively with GAO. And how can we kind of take your experience and expand on it in other agencies?
So with us at DHS, it quite frankly started with the senior-most leadership in the department, from the secretary, the deputy secretary, the general counsel, and the undersecretary for management. If you go back to each of their confirmation hearings, this type of issue was discussed at the hearings, and they all went on record and committed to helping grow and robust up the new and improved process that we had. And that cascaded down through the department. They have been tremendously supportive of my office. We are allowed to reach out and touch anyone, anywhere within the department at any time to dialogue and engage on GAO and OIG
so you
audit
think,
activity.
You think the accountability point really was when it reached a level here where we're sitting across from the nominees saying, here's your audit report, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I think our leadership wanted to do the right thing and would have done it regardless, but certainly when it's on record at a confirmation hearing, and they've taken that to heart and followed through. They've cascaded it down. The Comptroller General talked about recommendations hopefully being closed within 4 years. Our goal at DHS is to close them within 2 years, 24 months. And we track and monitor that all the time, to include bi-monthly briefings to the Deputy Secretary and other senior leaders, including the Undersecretary for Management and the General Counsel.
Yeah. Not to belabor this, but Jean, that might be the point of getting that kind of information on what's open so we don't see a lapse as we transition, and make it part of that process, make it part of the expectation that when you come, you're going to take these recommendations seriously. And if you don't agree with them, then we can have that debate. But if you do agree with them, then what's the time frame? And so I think having a high-profile evaluation here on these kinds of recommendations and have your priority list and having those letters is going to be useful in the transition.
Yes, there's 2 points on this. One, we've done for this committee in the past a set of questions that could be asked during nomination hearings. Senator Voinovich was involved in this before. We can dust that off and update it and provide that to you as well. This was made broadly available from this committee to all the other committees that hold the confirmation hearings on new appointees. Secondly, under the Presidential Transition Act, GAO has a responsibility to be a source of information to incoming administration. So last time in 2008, we produced a website with all the key issues that we thought by department and agency on a cross-cutting basis, priority recommendations for the incoming administration to use. That was made available to the Congress and the public all at the same time. We did that 2 days after there was a president-elect determination. So we're positioning ourselves to do the same thing next time around. Now, while I have the floor, there's one correction I need to make, and I think it's significant. The 60-day letters that we've been talking about, by law, they come to this committee, our GAO's Oversight Committee on the House and Senate, and the Appropriation Committees. They do not go, my team tells me, to the authorizing committees, as Senator Tester mentioned. So I want to correct that, my answer, but it also, I think that's an opportunity for changing the law. I think that needs to go, they need to go to the authorizing committee.
Or it should be standard practice.
Yes.
That this committee shares it with the authorizing committee.
Yes. So we'll take that and then build upon any other suggestions in our reexamination. But I think that change should be made.
Can I just run down? I've been trying to keep a kind of running list of kind of ideas and issues here as we kind of look at adding this kind of good governance piece. And you are absolutely a foundational need for good government. There's no doubt about it. But if nobody wants to kind of build on that, we don't get the results that we need. So we're talking, Gene, about the 60-day letters. You're going to look to see if there's a quality response kind of indication, because, if they're just got to, the night before it's due, throw something together as opposed to actually having a plan for implementation. Then legislation on authorizing committees. Looking at transparency, increasing the transparency of the 60-day letters, and then taking a look at kind of standard practices on how you deal with them. And some of those are administrative, some of those are legislative, and we'll have to sort through that. We've got the IG Empowerment Act that that absolutely needs to be done if the IGs are going to be our partners that they need to be. We've heard today a specific problem with human services access to the database for cross-referencing any kind of fraud or failure to basically do the double check that we need to do to make sure that people aren't getting aren't getting paid who are not statutorily qualified to be paid. Then looking at the additional resources. And that's something that we need to share with our colleagues. Senator Tester is on appropriations. I don't know, Senator Langford's on appropriations. That's helpful to bring that message back. But I honestly believe that as we've seen the benefit of kind of this collaboration across agencies that GAO is able to bring as a result of their centralized mission, that we need to do something like that. Maybe not centralize the IGs, but definitely create a database and create the resources that we need. And then obviously the authorizing committee. What did I miss here?
No, I think you got everything. The human resource base is the new hire database. That's one, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's a pretty good list. I don't think you missed anything.
The one thing I want to talk a little bit about is, as we now go into tax season again, the problems that we have with the IRS database and with inappropriate refunds. Everybody wants to get their refund quickly. That's the system that we've now designed as a former tax commissioner. If we got your refund within, a month, people were thrilled. That now would be seen as, my goodness, I want it tomorrow, kind of thing. And obviously that has created that desire to get people back their refund has created a situation where we may not be doing the kind of double check that we need to do before those refunds go out. And I know that's not the purpose of this hearing, but I am concerned as we go into this tax season that we are better prepared than we were last tax season to catch fraud and abuse of that refund system.
This is an area, I mean, this fits with this hearing. We have open recommendations that require statutory change by the Congress that we think is necessary to fix this problem. Number one, you need to accelerate the dates for W-2 filings. Right now, the IRS does not get the W-2 information to match, from the employers until April. And by then, it's too late. The crooks file early, and they're getting in, and they're filing with identity theft, and that's a big vulnerability, and IRS is limited in their ability to do that. This would also help in other areas in terms of, wage withholding for Social Security as well, to have the W-2 information earlier. So that's number one. Number two, we think Congress ought to give IRS the authority to regulate paid tax preparers. And a lot of returns are prepared by paid tax preparers. IRS has done an analysis. A significant number of those returns have inappropriate advice on claiming the earned income tax credit. We did an undercover investigation where we sent people out to 19 paid tax preparers, and in only 2 cases did we get the correct answer for the situation that we had in terms of the filing situation of our undercover teams. And we looked at the data that IRS had submitted, and over 60% of the returns, our estimate is, and they confirmed it, for returns prepared by paid tax preparers had errors in them. So IRS tried to do this based on, this is a case where the agency moved quickly on our recommendation, put it into place, but then they were sued. And the courts determined they didn't have the authority to do it, and so Congress needs to act.
Going back, James is talking about, the carrot and the stick. Let's talk a little bit about the carrot, which is, how do we reward agencies who can find cost savings so that they can actually kind of reward employees? I'm curious, Jean, have you seen any agencies that have run a very good, tell us what your efficiency idea is and we'll implement it, and, kind of a good reward system for federal employees to basically participate in cost savings?
I'd have to go back and check. I know we've looked over the years at various efforts to be able to do that, including gain sharing ideas, and they're always ran into methodological problems and justifying the savings, having a good data to justify that, and then how the allocations were going. But I know that there needs to be better incentives in the area to do it, because a lot of agencies will say, well, if we save the money, we don't get to keep any of it, and so what's the incentive of doing it? And so I'll go back and give you a thorough answer in this and understand a little bit, but I know enough to know and feel confident of telling you it's not where it needs to be.
Right. I mean, my point is we can kind of threaten agency heads with, whistleblower and, we're out to get you, or we can provide incentives for them to look for the cost savings and for them to actually, participate with us in encouraging employees to step up and rewarding employees who do step up with great ideas on saving money. And so, I mean, I just honestly believe that there's a plan out there. There could be a plan out there that could reap greater rewards, and more than anyone else, you have that kind of view from a mile high on all these agencies, and so be really curious about what agency you've seen that has done a particularly good job incentivizing employees to participate in cost reduction. Finally, I have one question, and it goes back to workforce. And it's something that you raised early on, Mike, which is this idea of cybersecurity. Right. My question is, do you think that there is adequate expertise within agencies, and this probably for you too, Jean, adequate expertise within agencies on cyber issues, and we saw obviously very high-profile instances of data breaches today that protect that federal database from hacking, that protect critical infrastructure of this country? Do you think we have the employee base?
We just actually did a review of that earlier this year on the Next Generation Cyber Initiative that the FBI does. We looked at this issue extensively within the FBI, and that was one of our most significant findings, is the FBI has lots of vacancies in these very critical positions for the reasons we see in the news as to how important it is to have the right staff. Pay is an issue. Recruitment, other issues arise in getting top-notch talent to fill those jobs, and we found lots of vacancies and made recommendations regarding that.
I know we're running a little bit over, but I am curious what you think the key 3 recommendations are to fill that gap.
Well, one is pay. The FBI simply can't compete on some of these positions, as we learned, with private sector opportunities. A second issue, which Director Comey has talked about, is some of the background checks that go on, and that the FBI has to think about how they do that for the current graduates and individuals they want to recruit for these positions, and thinking about how do they attract the right talent and get them through, and people who can get through the background investigation process. So those were just a couple of things that we identified, as well as outreach and greater recruitment efforts.
I would just add, if I
Yeah,
might,
you bet.
on the cyber area, there are critical skill gaps, clearly, and that's part of the issue. We first put critical infrastructure or cybersecurity on our high-risk list in 1997. It was the first time that we ever identified a high risk across the entire federal government as part of our high-risk efforts. We added critical infrastructure protection in 2003. We just recently added the need to protect personally identifiable information. People skills are part of the problem, but also they do not have comprehensive security programs in place with good training for employees. A lot of malicious attacks come from employees clicking on emails and attachments that they shouldn't. Hundreds of our open recommendations are on the information security area and actions the agencies need to take. It's probably the single largest category of recommendations we make every year, because we do this across government along with the IGs. And there's just hundreds of these things, very technical things that they need to do, where they haven't upgraded, they haven't patched quickly, they need to do continuous monitoring. But the people part is important, but it's not the full set of recommendations.
And the first line of defense is cyber hygiene.
Right.
There's things that can happen every day that will make us safer, but it's not institutionalized. And we just need to understand on this committee the workforce issues, which is why I asked the question. Can I add to this discussion something that's on the other end, which is, $20,000, we're going to help you, do some outreach with kids who might be runaway, and you end up costing that agency $5,000 in audit costs. So at some point, we've got both ends of the spectrum, not enough, but then also, this kind of check the box accountability that leads to very high administrative costs on grants. And I would recommend that you take a look at what that accountability, especially the financial accountability piece, make recommendations to us and to other folks about, we asked for that. It's not, it's a check the box thing. It's not significant. We get that occasionally something might slip through the cracks and we end up paying something we shouldn't, but we are creating a multi-billion-dollar industry on the audit side with very little protection to the taxpayer fisc. And so I just lay that, on top of James's, accountability on one end. Let's take a look at whether we're driving up administrative costs and actually resulting in inefficiencies through accountability measures that don't add to the security and safety of the federal treasury.
I would say on both points. First, on the point that you're making, there are inefficiencies not only in the audit process, but in the application process and the whole the whole delivery system. We have a very complicated, expensive intergovernmental delivery system in the United States that I think needs to be reexamined and roles and responsibilities clarified. The federal government's on an unsustainable long-term fiscal path. State and local governments are under a lot of fiscal stress as well for a lot of the same reasons. I don't have empirical information yet to support this, but my instincts tell me that we can't support the complicated intergovernmental delivery system in the future in the same manner and expect to get a good result at the end. With regard to the issue you raised, Senator Langford, I believe we need a paradigm shift. Right now, programs get funded year after year without having to demonstrate that they had a positive result on anything. And when we go in and look at overlap and duplication, we find many programs have never been evaluated. So there's really not any empirical information to say that the investment that we've made is working very effectively. And it's up to the auditors to prove that the program's not doing something. I mean, you have to really prove that it's not doing anything for it to ever get stopped, as opposed to having positive assurance that the program was really successful in achieving its objectives and having good independent evaluation results to say, if we continue to fund this program, we'll get good results. Right. And so I think that it's totally backwards in the way it is now. Unless that changes, you're not going to get a different outcome.
Yeah.
No, just once again, thank you so much, and you know, I hope this has been a good discussion for you as well as for us and gives you some ideas of what we're looking at. I just really believe that this collaboration and partnership between this committee and particularly this subcommittee and you guys talking back and forth, I hope you find that that is a useful use of your time, because we really take seriously what you tell us and the need to move these ideas forward if we're going to be responsive to the taxpayers.
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate, from GAO's perspective, this hearing and the time and attention that you're giving to this subject. It's very important for our organization and our people to know that our work is valued and that we have the support. And there's no way that these recommendations will get implemented effectively without executive agency cooperation and congressional oversight. So it's imperative. We will dialogue with you as much as you want in order to make this a better government.